Right. Uh, Joseph O'Loughlin. I retired as a sergeant major in 2012, and I was the sergeant major for the Wounded Warrior Battalion West at Camp Pendleton, California. My deployments. My first deployment was October to May 1984 to 1985. I was with 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines. We deployed over to Okinawa, Japan, traveled to the Philippines, Japan, mainland Japan, Mount Fuji, Korea, and then back to the United States. The next deployment was with the 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines. I was with Lima Company. We did a shipboard deployment with a MEU, and we went to the West and South Pacific. Yeah. Then the next deployment was to still with Lima Company, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, went to Desert Storm aboard ship with the 5th MEB, and then we stayed afterwards as a MEU. Then the next deployment was the 31st MUSOC deployment to Okinawa with Lima Company, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines in 1992, 1993. The next deployment was with Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 1st Marines to the Persian Gulf region aboard the 13th MEU. And that was September to April of 1997, 98. And then my next deployment was with the 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, Echo Company, 13th MEU again. And that was about the same time, probably the September to April of 1998, 1999. My next deployment was with H&S Company, 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, with the 13th MEU to Iraq, and that was what was that? I think that was September, once again, August or September of 2003 till early 2004. The next deployment was with Lima Company, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines to Iraq, and that was September to April 2005, 2006. And then my last deployment, my 9th deployment, was with Weapons Company, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, 13th MEU, over to Iraq. And that deployment was, again, it was a summer deployment. So we left probably April and got back in November of 2007. All right. So I'm from Northeast Iowa, a farming community called Independence in Northeast Iowa. I grew up, I was the middle of 9 children. And so when I was 17, I joined the Marine Corps. My parents signed the papers so I could join. I went when I was actually 18. So I went to boot camp, and I stayed to help on the farm for the summer and the early fall. And then I went to boot camp from October to the end of December of 1982. Boot camp was, like I said, physically, it was, as far as the upper body strength, I didn't really have that problem, just, working on the farm. But the running, I hadn't done organized sports for a few years. So the running part was a little, not challenging for me, but I really enjoyed it because it helped me get back into running. And I started loving running in boot camp and carried that on throughout my career. But my boot camp experience, it was great. It was a great transformation. I joined the Marine Corps. I knew I wanted to join the Marine Corps because my father was a Army Infantry Korean War veteran, wounded twice. And so I knew I wanted to join the military, but I saw the Sands of Iwo Jima with John Wayne, and I knew the Marine Corps was my route. I did talk to an Army recruiter because my dad asked me to, but I knew I was going in the Marine Corps. And so that was it. I said I want to be Marine Corps. I want to be infantry. They had like a $2,500 bonus at that time back in the early '80s if you were to sign up to be an infantry. And so I signed up for that. Um, and I signed up, like I said, did my infantry time. So I went to boot camp. My first year after the infantry training school, which it was called then, was at Marine Barracks, Fallbrook, California. It was a naval weapons station where it's on the very east side of Camp Pendleton. So I spent my first year from March of '83 till the middle of 1984 at Marine Barracks Fallbrook. And what was great about the Marine Barracks Fallbrook is our NCOs were coming from operational units from either the first or second or third MAR Div. And so they were more infantry minded than security minded as far as training went. So we did handle security. We did learn security and secured everything properly. But they, luckily, like I said, the Marine Barracks Fallbrook land is basically Camp Pendleton. There's a fence separating Fallbrook, Naval Weapons Station Fallbrook from Camp Pendleton. So the ground was pretty much the same. So our NCOs taught us a lot about infantry tactics, patrolling, things like that, because they knew we were only spending a little over a year here, and then we were going to the operational forces. So I was blessed with good NCOs at there to prepare me to go to 3rd Battalion, 9th Marines, India Company in 1984. So 1984, summer of 1984, I get to the India Company, 3rd Battalion, 9th Marines, and it was just great. Once again, it was I signed up to be infantry. I wanted to be infantry, so it was great joining that unit. I had a phenomenal platoon sergeant, and the the squad leaders we had were great. They helped train us, helped move up. I was actually, was promoted pretty quickly through the ranks, and I became a squad leader. After after about 6 or 8 months into the unit of being in that unit, then we deployed. Like I said, around November. So that deployment was early November of 1984 until like May of 1985. And so that deployment, once again, we went to Mount Fuji, Japan. We were in there in February. So we had the mountain warfare, cold weather training, which was phenomenal. That's one thing about the Marine Corps and Marine Corps training. If it's, there's one thing about being cold and one thing about being wet. But if you're wet and cold, that's a whole nother story. So you really learn how to survive in a mountainous snow terrain and environment. You got to be there. You got to live properly. You got to train properly. You got to know how to dress, how to keep yourself dry, how to dry yourself off if you do become wet. And still at the same time, you're operating. You're doing attacks. You're doing defense. You're doing patrolling in that environment. So you have to be extremely well trained. And then from Mount Fuji, we spent a month in Mount Fuji, and then we took planes over to Korea for Operation Team Spirit 1985. And there, it was in March, so in the mountains there, it transitioned from snow to rain and then back to snow. And as I was saying about earlier, there's one thing about being wet and one thing about being cold, but if you're cold and wet, it gets really dangerous. And the training we received in Mount Fuji in the cold weather with the snow really helped us survive in the mountains of Korea when it would transition from snow to rain and back and forth again. And those hills in Korea were just extraordinary. unbelievable with the gear that we were carrying. And what was one little thing about the gear we were carrying, there would be the local Korean people that would, uh, we call them the mama-sans, these older ladies and men. They would have they would have packs full of like noodle soups and other things to sell us. And they'd have their little stove, but they'd be all packed in there in these packs. And they'd be hiking up the same the hills that we did with our, military packs. And then when there would be times that was allowed by the company command where we could have access to them, and they'd boil us up some soup and things like that. So that really made the difference on morale when we were able to do that. But of course, that was the only when we're doing non-tactical movements. But the same thing there. We'd do these tactical movements, basically training the same way that they had to train and fight in Korea, where you're moving up roads sometimes, but across hills and valleys, set up into defensive positions. Dig a fighting hole, set up your perimeter. Wake up the next morning, fill in those holes, and start hiking and humping and doing it all again, moving to contact in this operation, Team Spirit. So those were great times there. Really tested your physical abilities, your physical shape and endurance, and teamwork. You developed some phenomenal teamwork in those situations, such as the mountainous warfare training. We got back from that deployment in 1985, and so we were training up for the next deployment. And then I re-enlisted in the Marine Corps, and I requested orders to become a drill instructor. And so then in 1986, May of 1986, I went down to MCRD San Diego and went through drill instructor school from May to July of 1986. And then I was a drill instructor, 5 platoons as a green belt drill instructor, and then 2 platoons as a senior drill instructor. That was just a phenomenal duty there. The drill field, if you become a drill instructor, that is some of the most effective and efficient leadership development duty you can do, because the training schedule where you're training recruits is 3 months long. So you go through that 3 months and you're learning how, once again, especially as a new drill instructor down there, you're learning how to be a drill instructor, and you're learning how to train the basic level, entry level, civilians to become United States Marines. So you have a platoon from, say, 50 to, back then it was into the 90s, that you were training. And so you're learning how to best train an entry level person to teach them all about the Marine Corps, teach them about our culture, our heritage, legacy, instill that spirit and discipline into them. So you're learning how to do that, and you're making mistakes along the way. So then the next deployment, the next platoon that you're training, you're usually working with some other drill instructors. You've got more experience. Your drill instructors that you're working for and the senior drill instructor you're working for has more experience. So they're teaching you the most efficient ways to do things with a large group of individuals where, it might sound simple, but trying to get, say, 90 individuals to tie their boots the same way. You're trying to get all these people to do the same thing the same way because of attention to detail, uniformity, everything like that. So there's different methods and incentives that you have to use to train them to get them to do that. And you have to make timelines. Making timelines is so important because you have to show up properly dressed, properly equipped, everything like that. So every 3 months, it's kind of like Groundhog Day. Every training day 1 is the same. you're going to go to the same class. You're going to do the same physical training on training day one of this platoon that you did on last platoon. So every cycle, every 3 months, you get to hone your leadership and instruction skills. So you're becoming more and more efficient. So if you're tracking your progress and what you did well, what you didn't do well, what worked last time, what didn't work last time, and then you get with your team and you work together and you implement a new strategy to get this thing done in a more efficient manner. And then with the entry-level training, of course, they're being tested on their knowledge that they're learning. They're being tested on the drill capabilities, their self-discipline, on platoon drill evaluation, and they're also their physical fitness. Once again, trying to get some people show up to boot camp physical stud specimens. Others show up barely making the bare minimums. But you've got to get everybody through the courses. You've got to get everybody to pass that physical fitness test, and you're trying to get the highest score. You're having healthy competition amongst the other platoons. And that's another thing that makes the drill instructor duty so such an efficient leadership development program, is because every 3 months, once again, you've got healthy competition going. There's bragging rights about how high your platoon's physical fitness score was, how high your drill score was. The MOS is drill instructor, so of course there's a major focus on close order drill and the score that your platoon receives. And they're also the score that the unit leader receives. Because in the initial drill, it'll usually be a newer drill instructor taking them out as the unit leader and going through the drill evaluation. So you're getting graded. As a unit leader, your platoon's getting graded. Final drill evaluation, that's the senior drill instructor. And once again, there's bragging rights of how well that platoon does, how well the senior drill instructor does, how high of a prac score, that the average score that you, as practical examination score that the platoon gets. Because then it's healthy competition and bragging rights amongst the platoons in the company, but the companies within the battalion, and the battalion overall as with the regiments. You got a first, at MCRD San Diego, you had a first, second, and third recruit training. And of course, at Parris Island, there used to be a fourth battalion for the women Marine recruits, but now it's I think it's all combined. They don't have that battalion anymore. But I love that duty, becoming a drill instructor, then working up and being able to assume the role of platoon commander, as a sergeant of Marines, and be a senior drill instructor. That was, something to be very proud of. And so I did that duty till then August of 1988, I was transferred to the Lima Company, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines. So I got there as a squad leader for that training cycle and platoon deployment. And that was, we deployed aboard ship. So, we went to so many places, did so much training with other countries' forces. We went to the Philippines. We stopped in Okinawa. We went to the Philippines, trained inside the Philippines. We went to Hong Kong, had liberty there. We went to Korea for another team spirit while we were there, and we trained forces. We were able to go down to Australia. We went down to Sydney, Australia. We had liberty in Sydney, Australia for 10 straight days. It was just amazing. City, friendly, very people, and this is 1989, so it's really only 40 years after World War II, where there was such a close working relationship with the American military and the country of Australia, because the how we, after Guadalcanal campaign, the Marine Corps went down to Australia and New Zealand, and that's where they refitted, retrained for the rest of the island hopping campaigns that they were involved in. So there was a real close relationship with Australia and the U.S. military. So when we go into Australia, it was just very friendly, opening, welcoming people. So we did 10 days of liberty there. Then we all got back aboard ship and we did a operation with the Australian forces. And then we got another 6 days of liberty in in other ports. Then we came back around May, end of May of 1989 from that deployment. Okay, so then we were working up. We were working up for another MEU deployment, basically the same rotation as we did. We would have been going to basically the same places, I think. But then in August 2nd, 1990, that's when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and the whole world got turned around, refocused, and the U.S. military got refocused, and we started deploying over to Saudi Arabia and Persian Gulf region and everything like that. So we were already worked up on the MEU, and then the MEU joined the MEB, the Marine Expeditionary Brigade, the 5th Marine Expeditionary Brigade. So it was basically the 5th Marine Regiment and 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines was part of the 5th Marine Expeditionary Brigade. And that's how we deployed over to the Persian Gulf. And then we did our landing in Saudi Arabia, drove up into Kuwait with the form of combat operations in there. Okay, so August 2nd of 1990, I was actually on leave. My family and I were driving across country. I'm in like Tucumcari, either New Mexico or whatever that town is, middle of the night, fueling up with gas because we were driving straight back to Iowa as fast as you could. I was just going on leave. And I'm filling up on gas, and I hear the news, Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait, and that's basically all the news was saying. That's all we knew at the time. So I filled up with gas and kept driving. And as soon as it was daylight, I called home, called my parents and said, okay, your phone number is on my record, because we didn't have cell phones back then. Your phone number is my leave address phone number. So you might be getting a call telling me to call home or call back to the unit and everything. But just prepare for that. There's nothing in stone yet, but just prepare. But since we were already part of the MEU, the powers that be kept us with the MEU, joined us with the MEB, and then we did not actually deploy until December for Desert Shield. So Desert Shield started. I think the elements from the 7th Marines were some of the first to fly over there to Saudi Arabia and set up. And then 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, once again, as part of the 5th Marine Expedition Brigade, continued on MUSOC training and combat training, preparing, and we did not deploy until December for the Persian Gulf region. So we get to the Persian Gulf, we're floating around in there. The desert for Desert Shield, of course. When Desert Storm started, when they're doing all the bombings and stuff like that, we were out there as a force in readiness and as a diversionary force, doing practice landings, things like that. Then when the actual Desert Storm actually started, where they crossed the minefields and headed up into Kuwait again, then we landed. We followed through the breach on our Amtraks. The whole MEB, the whole 5th Marine Expeditionary Brigade was basically aboard Amtraks. We went through the breach, and then we kind of turned off, and we went into the Al Wafra forest, or Al Wafra oil fields, whatever they want to call it. and that's where we were handling the Iraqi army that didn't get the word, or that got bypassed. So when the invasion force of the Marines went through the breach and headed straight for Kuwait City, um, uh, they bypassed some Iraqi forces. So the MEB was in charge of kind of cleaning up those areas and making sure there was no surprise attacks or anything like that. So we were in the Al Wafra forest, and if at that time, that's when I think Saddam Hussein had blown up a lot of oil wells and things like that, and the oil fire clouds that blanketed the whole region. We're at noontime, and it's darker than night because the only atmospheric light that we could see, it blacked out all the stars and the moon. There's the only light we could see was oil derricks that were on fire. So it was very eerie because it was, once again, noon, but pitch black, pitch black. And then when it starts raining, of course, all the rain coming down, coming through the clouds, so it was very oily rain that was covering all your body and your equipment and clothing, stuff like that. So we spent, I don't know how many days, in there finding the Iraqi forces that didn't know that they got bypassed and left behind, and handling prisoners of war, and doing mop-up operations through the Al Wafra forest and Al Wafra oil fields. And then after a certain time, we received orders to re-embark aboard ship. So we did that. We re-embarked aboard ship. And then when everybody else went home, including the 5th Marine Expeditionary Brigade, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines was left with the MEU. So we stayed around in the Persian Gulf until around like July or August. And then we left and we came home. So everybody who got to Desert Storm early, or Desert Shield early, they returned home after the push into Desert Storm. And so they were back around the end of February, early March. They were returning home. But our battalion, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, we stayed over in the Persian Gulf region. We trained with some other coalition forces, and trained in, I think, Oman and United Arab Emirates over there while we were there, until we returned home.
All right, so
with the first prisoners that we dealt with they were basically shell shocked. Our coalition forces were bombing them into submission. They were, there's the old saying that never send a man where you can send a bullet, and the bigger the bullet, the better. Well, President Bush and his generals were doing things correctly, because the first prisoners that we came upon, they were basically walking zombies. They were shell shocked. They were starving. They didn't have no water. They were giving up to, news people. So a lot of times, some of them we would bypass. Our interpreters would just tell them, drop your weapons, keep moving south, and someone will collect you. We collected some. We didn't collect all. But the first ones that we experienced were, they knew they'd been abandoned by Saddam Hussein, and they knew they were defeated. So they were very compliant. They were just looking, probably trying to get something to eat. They were starving, because we had cut off their supply lines. We once again bombed them into submission. When we got into the Al Wafra forest, there were some people that didn't get the word. That 10%ers, those Saddam Hussein's 10%ers who didn't get the word. So they were still willing to put up some sort of a fight. But being the United States Marine Infantry, those Iraqi forces were no match for us. I mean, we were fully loaded with ammunition. We were fresh. We were trained. We weren't, that was for the majority of us. That was our first introduction to combat. Luckily, the battalion did have some Vietnam veterans, And the greatest help was the Beirut veterans. We had plenty of Marines in the battalion who were members of 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines that had been in Beirut under bombing, under fire, and had engaged the enemy in combat. So we had combat veterans to help us train up for the combat. So when we met those Iraqi forces, our training kicked in, our discipline kicked in, and the ones that we met, first off, it was it was a one-sided affair. They fired at us first. They weren't willing to surrender at first. So some of them, there was very few that, there was a few of them who had the opportunity afterwards, after we assaulted through, that were able to surrender. But the ones that thought they were able to fight us, they learned the hard way on dealing with the United States Marines. So we got home from that deployment, and we just started training up for the next deployment. The Marine Corps had to reconfigure around how the deployment cycles were. In the 1st Marine Division at that time, there was the 1st, 5th, and 7th Marine Regiment for the 1st Marine Division. Each of those regiments had 4 battalions. They had their 1st Battalion, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Battalion, but they also had a battalion from the 9th Marine Regiment. 1st Battalion, 9th Marines was with 1st Marines, 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines was with 5th Marines, 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines was with 7th Marines. And they transplaced some of those numbers later on to the 4th Marine Regiment. So the 1st Marines had 1-4, 5th Marines had 2-4, and 7th Marines had 3-4. So there was at the 1st Marine Division, all of those regiments had deployment schedules of basically 6-month deployments, 18 months back, 6-month deployment. That's how the deployment schedules would work. The battalions would rotate. Well, with Desert Storm, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, that threw that rotation system into whack. So they were working, so they had to rearrange that. So we were 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, we were given a deploy. We just got back. You are still going to deploy at this time. So we start working up, doing our workups, training. Some Marines are transferring out. We're getting new Marines transferring in, and we're training. We're training to go back on deployment. And at that time, the 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, we went to Okinawa, and we were the first ground combat element for the newly established 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit that was stationed, headquartered in Okinawa, Japan. So we flew over to Okinawa, but then we did the regular MUSOC training and deployments aboard ship. So once again, we went to the Philippines, we went to Singapore, and we went to Hong Kong again as for Liberty, Thailand, I think, and we did training with those forces over there. The great thing about the Marine Corps and the Marine Expeditionary Units that travel around over in those other countries, we train with our coalition forces, our allies, and help bring them up to speed. Because one thing we've learned in Desert Storm, and especially in Iraq, that United States forces move fast. We are efficient, we move fast, we have our logistics worked out, so we can move. We can usually move faster than other coalition forces. So we have to train them to have them try to help keep up with us. So 2002, about around October again, 2002, not 2002, I'm sorry, 1992. 1992, we deployed over to Okinawa as part of the 31st MU. So we do that deployment, and in May, we come back from that. At that time, I only have, let's see, I have a little over a year left on my contract because I re-enlisted for 6 years. And so I didn't have time to go on deployment with 3-1 again because that was my 3rd deployment with 3-1. usually you only do 2 deployments with a unit, but I stayed for the 3rd deployment. But I only had a year left, over a year left on my contract. And after Desert Storm, there was a huge downsizing of the military forces, and especially the Marine Corps. And so one of the MOSs that was being downsized for some unknown reason was the infantry. So there wasn't an opportunity at that time for me to reenlist. And so I was transferred to the School of Infantry, to the Infantry Training Battalion, and I was worked as a platoon sergeant in one of the platoons there, training once again the entry level people that just graduated boot camp. And at that time, all Marines went to they changed it to where all Marines go to the School of Infantry. School of Infantry is broken down as a regiment. There's Marine Combat Training Battalion for all non-infantry MOSs. And then there's the Infantry Training Battalion for all infantry MOSs. So I was assigned to the Infantry Training Battalion where we were an MOS producer. So I did a, 9 months, I think, as a platoon sergeant in one of the training companies. And then I transferred to the instructor cadre part, the instructor section. And I was an instructor for the 0300 package, the basic infantry package, then the 0311 with the 0311 MOS producer section, where I was teaching combat training, offensive combat, defensive combat, patrolling, weapons handling, things like that. And then I stayed there until I was promoted staff sergeant in October 1996. December of 1996, I received orders from Headquarters Marine Corps to the 1st Battalion, 1st Marines in December of 1996. I joined Alpha Company. So that was phenomenal. So as one great thing about the Marine Corps, wherever they sent you do your MOS time, then you usually do some type of, they call it special duty. So my special duty first time was the drill instructor duty. And then the second time at the School of Infantry, as when you're instructing in your MOS, you just become so much more efficient at it. So the best way to learn your job is to have to teach it. So when you're teaching it, it's just being ingrained in your mind even more. So as a staff sergeant, I joined the Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 1st Marines as a platoon commander because we didn't have a lieutenant yet. So I was the staff sergeant. I was the platoon commander. I had squad leaders and Marines that some had already done a deployment, and some are graduating from the School of Infantry, from the Infantry Training Battalion. So then I had them, and then now it's my responsibility to bring them all up to speed, ensure that they know their job, they know their MOS, know how to be a rifleman, know how to be an assistant automatic rifleman, team leader, squad leader. And so it was just a great opportunity to have them start going over and make sure and I would bring them up to speed, what they should know and how to work together. And once again, you're bringing all these people in from different experience levels, and you're training them to work together, and you're developing them. And once again, I love infantry. I just love being in that infantry environment, that big family environment where you're working hard together, training together, going on deployment together. You're really building some tight friendships with each other and lifelong relationships. So I did. So I trained. I was training on that. We eventually did, after, I got there in December. Around April, I think, we did receive a second lieutenant, got assigned to us. So he became the platoon commander. I stepped down as the platoon sergeant. And then, once again, working with him. He's a lieutenant newly coming from the infantry officers course, so they've been trained very well. They had They had their officer candidate school. Then they had the basic school to train how to be officers. Then as infantry, they had their infantry officers course where they're getting pounded into their minds everything they need to know as a commander of infantry Marines. So they have that book knowledge, but they don't. They're 22, 23 years old. There's the experience level knowledge that they don't have. That it's my responsibility as a platoon sergeant to help them along and help develop them as a commander. Because throughout the Marine Corps history, there's been, lance corporals, corporals, sergeants, staff sergeants, gunnery sergeants as rifle platoon commanders. So we can have someone do that, perform that job. But what is really important about the platoon commander position is for a young officer to get that command experience so that they can move later on into a company commander, because a company commander must have command experience before they take over a rifle company. So it's my job not only to train the Marines, but to help train the platoon commander as well. I remember in the 3rd Battalion, 1st Marine, or 9th Marines, the first time I was a platoon sergeant, and we received a new platoon commander. The company commander had us both in the office, and he straight out said, "Sergeant O'Loughlin, if I have to fire this lieutenant, you're going with him." So he basically gave me his marching orders to help train this young officer to be successful. Because if that commander fails, the senior enlisted fails. That's a failure on the senior enlisted part as well. So I took that to heart back then in 1985, and it was ingrained in my mind. So in 1996, it was even more important to me, 97, 98. So I was the rifle platoon sergeant at that time until we went on deployment. And then halfway through deployment, the company gunnery sergeant had a family issue, had to get sent back, had to go back to the United States. So the weapons platoon sergeant became the company gunnery sergeant. And then I moved over as the weapons platoon sergeant of Alpha Company's weapons platoon. And then once again, it's a whole nother thing. Luckily, as a staff non-commissioned officer, 0369, you're an infantry staff non-commissioned officer. That means you have to know not only riflemen, 0311, you need to know 0331, 0341, 0351, 52 knowledge. And you have to get that knowledge on your own. Luckily, I did have that knowledge from studying on my own, and then being at the School of Infantry Training Battalion as an instructor. I was able to learn even more information about it. So I did the rest of that deployment as a weapons platoon sergeant. And then I had the opportunity to cross deck over to the 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, and do another deployment with them. They needed some staff NCOs over there. So I was able to transfer over to 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, and then went over to Echo Company as I started off as the company gunnery sergeant, because they were short on people. So I was kind of dual hatted as the weapons platoon sergeant, company gunnery sergeant. And then when we got another staff NCO, a company gunny in, he took over the weapons platoon sergeant. And then we got another gunnery sergeant in, so he became the weapons platoon sergeant. I took over as the machine gun section leader as the staff sergeant. And I did another deployment, once again, with Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines on the 13th MEU. We went overboard ship, went into the Persian Gulf, did training with coalition forces there. We did training with Australians, with the Thai forces, things like that. So a great all-around performance of what Marine infantry, especially a Marine Expeditionary Unit, a battalion landing team of Marines, can do. Okay, so after I returned from that deployment in 1999 with 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, I re-enlisted and requested orders back to MCRD San Diego. So I So in October of 1999, I attended drill instructor school, graduated that, and started training. I did a platoon once again since it's been 11 years or whatever since I've been gone, 12 almost, 11 and a half. I did one platoon as a drill instructor. I did 3 platoons as a senior drill instructor, and then I was selected to become an instructor at the drill instructor school. So at 9/11, when 9/11 rolled around, I was an instructor at the drill instructor school. And then I was there during the start of the global war on terrorism. And then when early 2003, when we knew we were going to, that it was going to get a lot more hot and heavy, I was transferred up to 1st Battalion, 1st Marines. And then I was the H&S company gunnery sergeant. As I said, I loved the infantry, and I loved being in a rifle company, and especially a rifle platoon. So when I checked into a 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, I wanted to be the company gunnery sergeant. I ended up being the senior gunnery sergeant, but I wanted a rifle company. I wanted to be the company gunnery sergeant of a rifle company. If we're going into combat, that's what I trained all my life to do. I didn't want to be in the H&S company. However, the battalion sergeant major and battalion commander had different thoughts, different expectations. So I was ordered to be the headquarters and service company gunnery sergeant. And I started out kind of kicking and screaming because I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be in the action. But in hindsight, working in the headquarters and service company, especially as a company gunnery sergeant, because company gunnery sergeant basically runs everything. Everything that happens or fails to happen in any organization, the company gunnery sergeant has his fingers in it, and has to be with the tempo, organizes and orchestrates the tempo of everything every operation and training that goes on. The company gunnery sergeant is involved. So the H&S company has all the administrators, has all the logistics, it has the communicators, has all of the your corpsmen in the Marine Corps. Our corpsmen assets are all headquartered in the H&S company. So it's basically just a mini representation of the whole battalion. And learning how to do that efficiently served me very well in my experience level. It just showed me, it opened my eyes a lot more than just the kind of narrow operations of a rifle company. So it really helped in the long run, prepared me for future assignments as a first sergeant and sergeant major. So because when we go over as a headquarters and service company, the battalion commander and his operations unit, it's broken into an Alpha command and a Bravo command. So they have to have security and protection. They got to be able to move, shoot, and communicate also. So it was my responsibility, training and operations, to ensure that every cook, administrator, logistics person was well versed in their abilities to operate as an 0311, because the Marine Corps, every Marine is a rifleman. Every Marine has to be able to operate in a infantry capacity. So it was my responsibility to ensure that all of these non-03 MOSs could operate machine guns, their M16 rifle. They had to know how to do patrols. They had to do roadblocks. They had to do search and seizures. They had to be able to take over a building if it was needed to be. So that caused me to have to work extra hard and be extra organized and have the training set up so that everyone is prepared. Because we couldn't get to combat. We couldn't get into a combat operation. And I said, oh, well, we can't do this because our administrator doesn't know how to run a machine gun. Oh, our S4 personnel doesn't know how to operate a Mark 19 or do a search of a seizure of a vehicle in a roadblock. So it's very important to cross-train and to have everybody be brought up to speed. And that meant I had to work very closely with their staff NCOs and their officers and their NCOs because I couldn't do it myself. No one can do it themselves. It takes teamwork, and it takes everybody working together and knowing their responsibilities, and everyone bringing themselves up to the standards. And every leader of their unit bringing their units up to the standards and being responsible for their performance, behavior, and conduct. We were down in the southern part of Iraq, in the down near the Basra area, and so we landed. We didn't, we weren't part of the initial invasion of the push north. We were part of the 13th MEU. So when we landed in Iraq, we're down in the Basra area, down southern Iraq, near the at the bottom of the Persian Gulf area, and we were. This is August time frame. So what was going on then? There was a lot of oil smuggling, drug smuggling, and theft of say like the copper, all the copper in the electronic, anything electronic that had copper. There was someone stealing it to sell because it was the black market, the drug trade, the oil. They were stealing oil, and then taking it out and pirating it out in the Persian Gulf region. So we were dealing with a lot of that. We were stopping that things down there. We were helping rebuild some of the infrastructure of the country that had been destroyed by Saddam Hussein and other people in that area. So the 13th MEU, when we were in there in Iraq, we weren't dealing too much with organized enemy forces. That was we were starting to deal with some of the military who changed out of uniform, slipped into civilian gear, and started helping build the insurgency. But the insurgency needs money. One of the ways they got money was to knock holes in the oil pipelines, put it into their to barrels, put it into their little small boats, and then take it out in the Persian Gulf and sell it on the black market out there. Same thing with the drug trade. They were running all kinds of drugs down there. So we were involved not only with interdicting them on land, but out into the Persian Gulf area also on the water. So my first, the first few months that we spent in there was basically dealing with the start of the insurgency and a lot of criminals. The people down in that southern part, I think their religion was heavily Shia Muslim, and I think they were kind of associated religiously and probably a lot of family-wise with the Iranian people. The one thing I remember, we were looking across, we were set up on the right at the edge of the Persian Gulf, and where our they call them Rupu. I can't remember what the exact terminology of it, but they're the marine facilities types who make water. They make fresh water out of dirty water. They suck it up from rivers or canals, and they put it through their filtration system and pumps out good, clean water. Because a lot of the people in the southern area where we were at, the civilian populace didn't have water. They didn't have good, clean water capabilities. So our forces, we were helping them make a lot. Well, where we were set up as security for the facilities that are making the water, right across was some Iranian outposts because we were that close to Iran. And for some reason, they fired at some of them fired at some of our LAVs vehicles, and of course they had to fire right back, and so that was one thing where there was some fire exchanged between Iranian forces. You know, when we were in there dealing with Iraq, but then we ended up having to deal with some Iranian forces. That was the major memorable aspect of that deployment. For that deployment in the southern part of Iraq, once again, we were dealing with more criminals, so we were doing a lot of roadblocks, things like that, and recovering. You know, there wasn't a lot of combat fighting on that one. Once again, we were seizing a lot of drugs, oil, weapons, explosives, things like that, that they were trying to smuggle away from their organized. When their organized military kind of evaporated, there was a lot of munitions, weapons, artillery rounds, mortar rounds, leftover explosives that the criminals were grabbing and trying to get to the insurgency. So we were interdicting a lot of that. So that was the major part of that. We were in country. I don't even know how many months we were in. I can't even remember how many. Then we got back on our ships. We redeployed on ships, trained with another coalition force somewhere, and then slowly went back to the United States. So right after that deployment, we got back, and again, I'm reaching service limitations as a gunnery sergeant, and so I didn't have enough time to go on another deployment. Went over to the regimental headquarters, the 1st Marine Regiment, and at that time, the 1st Marine Regiment headquarters was over in Iraq, in Fallujah. They had handled this was 2004. This is early 2004. So the 1st Marine Regiment was over in Iraq in Camp Fallujah, or not Camp Fallujah yet, I don't think. But anyway, so I was a headquarters company 1st Sergeant. I was dealing with the remain behind, a lot of all the Marines that were ill or injured, that were still, they came from the battalions, so they were part of the headquarters company, and so we were helping them. A lot of them were EASing; they were up, their time was up, or they had physical injuries that they had to recover from, or they were being medically processed for discharge. So I had to organize them, make sure they were making their appointments, make sure the paperwork was all going forward so that they didn't miss any type of deadlines to be discharged. So that the summer of 2004, I was there. And then that's when, then the end of 2004, at the start of the second Battle of Fallujah, I had just got selected for, actually, no, I hadn't been selected yet. So the second Battle of Fallujah started as the headquarters company 1st Sergeant. I was had to be involved with casualty notification, things like that. That's tough duty there. I don't wish that on anybody. So I had some of that. But then I got selected for 1st Sergeant and assigned to the 3rd Battalion 1st Marines. They just finished up the Al Wafra, right? Not Al Wafra, the Al Fajr campaign. They were still over there, but they had, the 1st Sergeant, or the Battalion Sergeant Major calls me from Iraq, said, "Hey, you're being assigned," because the Division Sergeant Major was over there. I got assigned to 3rd Battalion 1st Marines. The Battalion Sergeant Major told me, "Hey, you're checking, get over to 3rd Battalion 1st Marines now, help organize all the remain behind, and get them ready for the battalion to redeploy back to the United States. Make sure that all the barracks is good for them to move back in, things like that." So then the battalion gets back, and we have a date. So the battalion gets back in like end of January, February of 2004, and they already have orders to go back in September of 2004. I'm sorry, 2005. They get back in early 2005, and they already have orders for September to go back to Iraq. So I'm the Lima Company First Sergeant. We do the transition from the First Sergeant who came back with the Lima Company, and we started working up. We started getting new people in. We start transferring people out, and we start building up to go back to Iraq. We're going to fly back to Iraq in September of 2005. So once we get new Marines in, we transfer Marines out. We're doing training up. We're doing a lot of live fire training. We're out in 29 Palms doing live fire training, and we're just getting ready. And we're getting the new Marines in. I'm working with all the NCOs, staff NCOs, and officers to ensure that these new Marines that haven't experienced combat are fully trained up. They have a good picture of what to expect when you go into a combat environment. They have to work with their leaders so that they build trust in their leadership. We fly over to Iraq. We're at the Haditha Dam. We take over from the 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines, who had a really heavy combat tour, and the Haditha Triad. They called it Haditha Triad. And so we take over from them. We do a major operation to clear the city of Haditha, because after the Second Battle of Fallujah, a lot of those bad guys snuck out and they went down to the Haditha Triad, took that area over, robbed the banks, killed the police, took over all the hospitals and medical facilities and took all their medicine, and just controlled that area. It was a real rough time for a 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines. They heavy combat. So we went in there. The battalion had a very large operation area. And so we were able to give up one of the areas of operation that we had inherited when we moved in, and another unit took that area over. So we were able to focus on the Haditha Triad, city of Haditha, Haqqaniya, and Barwana. And so we did a major operation, and we retook the city of Haditha. Once again, not as heavy as the Fallujah campaign, but we had to go into the city, had to get rid of the bad guys, had to go building by building, room by room, street by street, clear it out, find any of their caches that they left, any of their insurgents that wanted to stay behind and cause a hate and discontent. So that was a real heavy focused month-long, probably month of getting fully through the city of Haditha. And then one rifle company stayed in the city of Haditha. One rifle company, our India company, so Kilo Company stayed in Haditha. India Company took over the city of Haqqaniya. Lima Company went across the river, the Euphrates River, and took over the city of Barwana. And there we stayed. The rifle companies stayed in those cities. Our weapons company was roving throughout our area of operations, keeping the roads cleared from insurgents, because they stayed around and they were planting IEDs in streets. They had some suicide bombers in vehicles that were attacking our vehicle checkpoints and our vehicle convoys. So each company was dealing with that throughout the next months of our deployment through the winter and early spring of 2006, when the battalion deployed back to Camp Pendleton in probably April of 2006. We finished up that deployment. So during the time there, when we split off into those cities, when each rifle company split off into those cities, each company had attached to them an Iraqi company, an Iraqi army company that we were training. We worked with, we did operations with, and we did security operations with, and we were training them, trying to get them up to speed, because when they were rebuilding the Iraqi army, they took any Iraqis that wanted to be in the Iraqi army. So the first sergeant that I was working with, he had been in the Iraqi Air Force. He had been an enlisted man in the Iraqi Air Force, but now he's an Iraqi Army first sergeant. So we had to work very close with our interpreters and these Iraqis to teach them the proper way for handling security, because in our firm bases, we took over these school compounds in Barwana anyway. We took over a school compound, and that's where we lived. The Iraqis lived on one side, we lived on the other. But the security posts went all the way around both compounds, and there was an Iraqi soldier on post with a United States Marine. And so you had to work very closely with them to make sure that they were doing security properly. We would train them to do patrols with us properly, the way to proper do a patrol, the proper way to handle a defense out in the field as we're moving out in the area, how we're moving through the city, the proper way to move as a unit, the proper way, like I said, to conduct combat operations when you're going to do an attack on something. We even had developed them enough that we were able to execute a combat attack onto an Iraqi position or enemy position using helicopters. We took the Iraqi army and got them trained up enough where we could attack using helicopters. That was very interesting. Now, while you're there, you're trying to learn as much Arabic as possible, so that when you're dealing with when you're going through the cities, working with the city people, you're trying, like it says, no better friend, no worse enemies. But we also tried, just like the doctor's vow, do no harm. So when we're dealing with the Iraqi populace, we don't want to make any enemies by being overly aggressive at the wrong time, by being disrespectful to their customs courteous when possible. So we had to try to learn as much Iraqi or Arabic as possible. So we would, I had this squad leader. I had this one squad leader. All of our squad leaders were doing it, but the one squad leader became so efficient at Arabic, and he was such a phenomenal leader that the Iraqi soldiers actually wanted to go on patrol with him. They volunteered. There was no hesitation of those Iraqis soldiers to go on patrol with the United States Marines if that squad leader was leading them. Other squad leaders were like that also, but the one was just so efficient at it. It was great to see. It was great to see. And it just comes down to the same old thing about leadership. People will live up to whatever standards they are held to and led by. And this squad leader was such a great squad leader that he gained the full trust and confidence of those foreign soldiers to go into life and death situations with them. They were not afraid to go into combat with this squad leader. So we were in the western part of Iraq there, in what they call the Sunni Triangle. And I was told, I'm not officially, but I was told one of the Marine generals told another Marine general that's got that area of responsibility, he says, just go in there and try to make a difference, because the Sunni Triangle was tough. They didn't want us there. The insurgency was so embedded in there that it was tough going. The Sunni Triangle was tough going. Fallujah, Ramadi, the western out by the border, by the Syrian border. It was tough. It was fighting all along. It was gunfights all the time. And when we went in there, once again, we started working with the Iraqi soldiers, training them up. We were going through the cities, making contact with the tribal leaders and their city councils and stuff like that. But the tribal leaders were really the governing force of those areas. We worked so closely with them. The whole coalition, the whole Marines, that were, coalition forces that were assigned to the Sunni Triangle. We were working so close with them. I do believe that in our area of responsibility, I can't say about everywhere else, but we were making a difference. We were making a difference. The people, although they didn't like foreigners in their area, they were not hostile to us. Before we left, we were receiving intelligence from the Iraqi people about where someone planted an IED, where someone might be planning a suicide vehicle attack against us. I remember that it was just working very close with the tribal leaders and working with the Iraqi forces. I do believe we made a difference. Did it all fall apart after we all pulled out? I don't know. I don't know if history will eventually say that we did a great job or not. But I know by the time we left in April, we left our area of responsibility in April of 2006. The Iraqi companies that we were training were becoming efficient. The people were not outwardly hostile to us. They were actually giving us information about the insurgents. We took a lot of bad guys out to stop hurting because the insurgents, they would be brutal to the Iraqi people, just as they would be cruel and kill them also if they thought they were helping us. So by the time we left, I know they trusted our battalion. I do not know how. Once again, I don't know how it was after I left that area. So we came back, and I was the Lima Company First Sergeant for that deployment. I transferred over as the Weapons Company First Sergeant, and then we went back into Iraq in the summer of 2007. So we were part of the MEU. So we left San Diego aboard ships. We got over, unloaded into Iraq, went in there, and they had went out into the kind of not middle of the desert, but they went out in the desert near Ramadi and made a combat outpost. They had all the engineers came in with their bulldozers, and they made huge berms in a huge, big square. And that became and we put tents up and little wood shacks, plywood shacks. And that was our headquarters. It was a combat outpost Golden. And again, we were training an Iraqi company or an Iraqi battalion. I was part of the weapons company, so we didn't have a Iraqi company with us, but we had some of our officers and staff NCOs were assigned to this Iraqi company to train, or the battalion to train. So with weapons company, once again, we were assigned to keep the roads open, patrol around to the outskirts, the hinterlands, interdict any type of insurgents that were trying to use the sparse area to hide and plan operations. It was the 13th MEU was operating out of Combat Outpost Golden. And weapons company was headquartered there also. The rifle companies had areas that their own combat outposts in different areas of that vicinity. During that deployment, the weapons company, our operations, we were everywhere. Our vehicles were rolling around that vicinity, around that area of our operations. We had it planned out so well that we covered a lot of space. We kept them off guard, and we were finding caches. I would say we were finding caches of weapons and explosives as if we planted them there. our company was very successful as far as moving around, finding caches, keeping them out of the insurgents' hands. We found a suicide vehicle factory where they made the suicide vehicles, where they put them together. We found them. We caught all kinds of, and we actually captured some of the insurgents implanting IEDs in the road. And so once again, we captured insurgents, we killed insurgents, and we just took a lot of capabilities out of the insurgents' hands by all the weapons and explosives that we captured. And the rifle companies of the battalion, once again, they were working with the areas, the little villages and things that were their area of responsibility. So we did some phenomenally good things outside of in a Ramadi area of influence there. That deployment end, probably like I said, September, October. I think we got out of Iraq in October of 2000. We took our ships back to the United States. I was selected for Sergeant Major, received orders to MCRD San Diego again. And so in February of 2008, I transferred down to MCRD. I did one training cycle as the first sergeant of Alpha Company in the 1st Battalion. Then I was promoted to Sergeant Major and took over the 2nd Battalion at MCRD again. Okay, so I did a little over 2.5 years, well, about 2.5, close to 2.5 years there as the 2nd Battalion Sergeant Major. And then I received orders as the Sergeant Major of Wounded Warrior Battalion West, where the Marine Corps, we collected up, had transferred wounded, ill, and injured Marines that were either trying to transition back to full duty or out of the Marine Corps. They, when a Marine is injured or on light duty in a operational unit, they are on that unit's rolls, on their TO, their roles. They're part of that unit, but they're not able to train and deploy. So they go against their numbers. They can't get a replacement for that person who's ill and injured because he's still on their rolls. He's part of that unit. He's part of that manpower table. So what the Marine Corps does, they transfer them to a Wounded Warrior Battalion. East Coast has one, West Coast has one. And so it transfers them to us so they can either get physically recovered and go back to a unit, or get recovered enough and go through the process to be medically discharged and retired. So I spent about 20 months there as the Sergeant Major of Wounded Warrior Battalion, and one of the most emotionally draining duties that you can do, but also where it props up your spirit because you see the indomitable spirit of Marines overcoming. You get a double amputee with a TBI, but still motivated, positive, still being proud of being a United States Marine and what he's accomplished in the Marine Corps. And the spirit that he's not going to give up. There's an old saying, and something in life will eventually kill us, but we never let something in life beat us. And the indomitable spirit of the Marines was just so evident at the Wounded Warrior Battalions. But at the same time, you see just the crushed and mangled bodies of the effects, the butcher's bill, effects of combat operations. But it's part of it, and it's a very rewarding duty. But as I said, the most emotionally draining duty I ever did, and I only did it for 20 months. And I retired in July of July of 2012. That was my I did my retirement ceremony, and then I was officially retired 1 November 2012. 30 years and 21 days or something like that. 24 days. Reflect over my career. I wish I could do it again. At my, I think at my retirement ceremony, I have a son with the same name as mine, is Mark Joseph II. He eventually went in the Marine Corps 2 years later after I retired. But I said, everybody asked me what I was going to do when I retired. And I finally thought of it. And I said, I'm going to steal my son's identity and rejoin the Marine Corps. So when I reflect over, but it's a young man's game. The body doesn't always want to go with your ego. If I could have stayed in, if I could have done more years, I would have. I wish, once again, wish I could do it all over again. I do not regret one day of my time in the Marine Corps. It's just, I tell people the greatest, most important decision I ever made and did ever make again was to join the United States Marine Corps. It has opened up more opportunities for me and for anyone else who does than you can describe. You can't even fathom, when you first join, you can't even fathom what it actually means to earn the title United States Marines. I mean, even after I retired and in the civilian world, you automatically have credibility as a United States Marine. Just automatic credibility. People know Marines can be counted on. And you're given those opportunities because you earned the title United States Marine.